Hi, you joining us today in the offices of the National Women's Health Network here in Washington, D.C. My name is Sarah Christofferson. I'm the Policy Advocacy Director here, and I am really excited to be joined by Isabel Chowdhury and Patrick Celestine. They're going to introduce themselves shortly. We're here to talk about cosmetics reform. So we've got a series of questions we're going to go through to give you the lay of the land about what's happening and what you can do to help fix this problem. And with that, Isabel?
Hi, I'm Isabel Chowdhury, and I am the Senior Policy Manager at the National Women's Health Network. We are consumer advocates who help shape policy and support consumer health decisions.
Yes, and I'm Patrick Celestine. I am a Federal Relations Counsel with the American Association for Justice. We support about 50,000 attorneys worldwide, and we work on access to justice issues.
Great, thank you both. So give us a quick overview of how your two organizations got involved in cosmetics reform.
So we got involved after hearing about the legal battle that was going on between Johnson & Johnson and plaintiffs who were mostly women and their families that were accusing Johnson & Johnson of having asbestos in their talcum baby powder, and this was causing their ovarian cancer. And so that was a really big issue to us as consumer advocates. We also know through information that was brought out after discovery during the litigation process that Johnson & Johnson were purposely pursuing and advertising their products to Black women, other women of color. So they were going to churches and they were distributing their products, their samples of their products for free to Black women, and they were also going on Spanish language radio and promoting their products after knowing that their products were harmful. And Patrick can discuss more about that.
Yeah, and we got involved because a lot of the litigation that took place involved our attorneys. A lot of our attorneys practice civil litigation, and so they represented a lot of these women, over 11,000 women altogether, who've sued Johnson & Johnson in regards to talc litigation as a result that caused ovarian cancer. We know that since about 1948, Johnson & Johnson knew that talc was a carcinogen and that it caused some type of health effect in human beings in general. And from the time from 1971 to the early 2000s, we also know that there was positive testing of asbestos in talcum powder at Johnson & Johnson.
So Johnson & Johnson knew they had a dangerous product, and instead of taking it off the market, they turned around and started actively marketing it towards women of color. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah.
Yes.
How is that possible? Why didn't current law prevent that from happening?
Yeah, so the current law regulating cosmetic products is the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act. Under the current law, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, is not required to assess the safety of products produced by manufacturers before they go on the market. And so manufacturers are not required to list all of their ingredients. They're not required to ensure that their products are not contaminated. And even when their products are contaminated, they are not required to recall the products that are contaminated. And so,
wow.
And that has recently led to other issues with beauty stores.
Yeah. So just as early as June of this year, we saw where Claire's Injustice was targeting certain makeup products to young girls, right? And in targeting those makeup products, the FDA does do random testing of products, and the FDA found in those random testing of those products that were targeted to young girls that there was asbestos in those products. The FDA privately asked Claire's Injustice to remove those products off the shelf, and they refused to do so. The FDA currently has no authority to make Claire's or Justice or any organization, Johnson & Johnson, remove products off the shelf when there's a contaminant in the shelf. And we see that because we know that Johnson & Johnson is still selling talcum powder products, although there's a clear alternative in cornstarch that's not more expensive or anything like that, but Johnson & Johnson's still selling talcum powder. And so
Because they can.
yeah, because they can.
Yeah.
There's no regulation. And so we know that with the Claire's Injustice situation, the FDA essentially had to publicly shame them in order to get them to remove those products off the shelf. They had no authority to force them to remove them off the shelf.
So now we've learned that the FDA does not have the power to take dangerous products off the market. The best they can do is try to publicly shame companies. Well, if the FDA doesn't have that power, what can Congress do to fix this problem?
Congress can pass legislation that protects consumers. So specifically with labeling, Congress can formulate legislation that requires for manufacturers to list all of their ingredients, and this would include fragrances, which is another issue. We know that with fragrances, manufacturers can combine dozens of chemicals that are often unknown to consumers to formulate an ingredient and call it fragrance. And these fragrances can contain toxic chemicals. And so requiring manufacturers to list all of the ingredients is definitely important. They can also require that fragrances are fully disclosed. And I don't know, Patrick,
Yeah, in listing all those chemicals, we want to make sure that there's a minimum warning label standard to include all those chemicals. And not just having minimum warning labels, which is not a requirement right now, we want to also make sure that companies are responsible for warning against reasonable foreseeable uses. And when I talk about reasonable foreseeable uses,
tell us what that means.
I don't want to be too lawyerly, but when I talk about reasonable foreseeable uses, I want to talk about a lot of beauty blogs and companies talk about alternative uses of cosmetics. So some of them are probably things that people know about and we hear about a lot of times, using petroleum jelly on your teeth to keep lipstick off, using mascara to cover up gray hair. Through our research, I think we found maybe 51 alternative uses of cosmetics that are promoted as alternative uses. And in the instance that women or men or whoever are using these cosmetic products as their publicized alternative uses, we want to make sure that they're being warned against the potential harms of those alternative uses. Maybe petroleum jelly isn't supposed to go in your mouth. Maybe mascara isn't supposed to go in your hair. Maybe it causes some type of adverse reaction to your scalp, or maybe petroleum jelly causes some type of adverse reaction to your the inside of your jaw. We want to make sure that they're warned against those alternative uses and what types of harm those alternative uses can cause.
That's great. So recap quickly for me. Congress can require safe ingredients.
Yes.
Yeah.
They can require labeling so that consumers know what's in those ingredients. And then they can make sure that that labeling touches on all of those uses that you just talked about that might not be strictly what it's for, but we know people use it that way. Is that right?
Yes,
That is
that's
right.
exactly
Yeah.
right.
Great. So now we've heard a little bit about what Congress can do. What can the public do?
The public can contact their Congress members. We know that last month, Congresswoman Chakowski released a bill. She introduced a bill called the Safe Cosmetic and Personal Care Act of 2019. That act provides a lot of protections for consumers. So protections around labeling, protections for vulnerable populations, including workers, which is really important to us. Also, salon workers are really affected by unregulated products because they're in constant contact with these products. So definitely contact your Congress member, and also check out our website. The National Women's Health Network provides a lot of information about what's going on in Congress, and also just information on the various chemicals that consumers should look out for. I know we just talked about talc, but there's also lead, there's formaldehyde, there are a lot of different chemicals that are also at issue.
Yeah, and another thing, almost every woman I run into and I talk about these issues with, I always refer them to EWG, the Environmental Working Group. The Environmental Working Group has a really good website as well as an app that you can research some of your products that you use on a daily basis. You'd be able to research them and see if they're EWG approved, see if they're safe cosmetic products, and see if you should even be using them. I have a lot of black women in my family, and so I'm always talking to them about the importance of looking at the ingredients. EWG also talks on their website about how most of the cosmetic products with the most toxic ingredients are advertised more to women of color. And so I've made it my mission to do that. That's my work. I want to promote EWG, tell women to look into what's in their cosmetic products. So I think that's something that the public can do. As also calling your congressperson, you also want to look into what ingredients are in your cosmetics.
Great, and that's the Skin Deep app, is that right?
Yes.
The Environmental Working Group?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
So call your member of Congress, and then also look in through the Skin Deep app about what you can do to protect yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Great.
And watch out for fragrances.
Watch out for fragrances. So we've covered toxic products that are on the market right now, what Congress can do to help consumers, and what the public can do to make Congress take action and to protect themselves. One of the things you can do is help us get the word out. Share this video, share our resources with your family and friends, and make sure people know that they can protect themselves and they can take action. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.